Good morning. Welcome back to Music is My Mantra, the podcast where we explore the intersection of music and wellness. Today, I'll be talking all about songwriting and how songwriting is a great tool for processing emotions. This is part of our April series, which is all about music as medicine. And songwriting is probably one of my very favorite music as medicine forms. I have been songwriting since I was a little kid, and I used to have a journal that I would write poems in and that sort of thing about the dramas of being a child or a teenager, trying to understand what love is. If you've been with me here from the very beginning, I did talk about my songwriting process quite a bit in the episode Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, because I realized that that book and songwriting had quite a lot in common when it came to using music as a tool for healing. But today I'll be just talking about my songwriting process in general and how songwriting can move emotions. And then I'll go into sharing what you can do today to play with songwriting and music to help you better balance out your emotional system. I'll end by sharing some journal prompts that can get the words flowing and that you can even turn into songs at the end of this episode. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'm not in our usual studio today. I am in my bedroom, and this may be the new studio space. We'll see. I've been really playing with the idea of moving my next few episodes online, because the more guests that I have on board, I just may have to do that logistically. In the meantime, here we are. This is a really sacred space for me. This is perfect that I can share all about my songwriting process with you in this space. About my songwriting process, this has definitely evolved over the years, and as I learn more about music theory and just what makes a good song, good writing, I, of course, have evolved as well as a songwriter. However, most of my songs still come from the same place, which is like a deep emotional place. For all of my female listeners, you may relate to this next thing I'm about to say, but I tend to get very emotional at least once a month. That is especially important for me to be working on my songwriting during that week or two. I've realized this over the years because I used to have terrible PMS. Our hormones just do so much that we even start to make up stories in our mind, or little things agitate us. For example, this morning, I gave myself 25 minutes to do some songwriting and just freestyling on the guitar before I recorded this episode, and it made me feel a lot better. My day job is pretty stressful at times, and I'm not always available to everyone. I have multiple locations that I manage. It can be really difficult to deal with all the different personalities, management styles, and that sort of thing. In my songwriting this morning, I was letting out all of my emotions about work. People have different ways of songwriting. You can co-write with people. Sometimes you come up with a concept and then you go into the lyrics. But for me, it's always been a very personal journey. What that looks like is that I typically start with an instrument so that I can bring myself into the music. For the last decade, my main instrument has been guitar. Lately, I've really enjoyed playing the piano. You can really use any instrument. You can use a drum. For me, playing an instrument is just setting a rhythm and setting a mood. When I find 3 or 4 notes, or even just 2 notes sometimes, and I can kind of play them almost like a mantra, almost like a meditation. Just feel into whatever I'm playing, and I allow my voice, or what some people call your heart song, to sort of come up and to make sound. Sometimes this sound, it has words, sometimes it's mumbo jumbo, as I like to call it, and it's just letting my voice explore different places. It could be really, really high, or it could be really down low, or I'm feeling out a melody as I'm playing the instrument to go along with the chord progression that feels like it's locked in time. So that allows the melody to sort of reveal itself. This is definitely not perfect. Like, I don't always hit the right notes. I always do try to warm up my voice and training my ear before I go into a songwriting session, it could be really messy. The more that I've practiced this, the more that words actually come out. I like to just try to express myself. That it's so simple. It's almost like a freestyle journaling exercise. Like I'm playing along, playing pretty much the same progression. Sometimes I'll mix it up and add another chord, or I'll like move to a different progression if I'm not feeling it, but I like to try to stay in one place until I can find a melody that I really like. And then once I have a melody, then I just start singing about my day. I start singing about what's bothering me. I start trying to name what it is that I'm feeling. Usually none of this stuff that comes out is actually where the song will end, right? Like this is just pure word vomit, for lack of a better word. What's coming out at this stage is just raw emotion and thoughts. And so it's not necessarily pretty. It's not necessarily the lyrics that I'm going to land on, but I'm looking for a theme. I'm looking for something tangible that I can actually write about. And usually what happens is that I actually find some words that I really like that I keep coming back to, or sometimes what I'm singing about has like 5 different themes and none of them are related, but that's totally fine because to write a song, you just need one story or one theme, so it doesn't have to be super out the gate perfect. I can only think of a couple of times where I've had this feeling of like downloading a song. As I mentioned in episode 2, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, the last time that this happened to me was when my dad died in 2021. And I wrote a song that was just pure emotion. I was like holding back tears, crying on either end of the song, and it just kind of came out. At that moment, I felt like I didn't need to change anything. And now when I go and revisit that song and I play it again, it still feels pretty complete. There was another song, Cowboy, that I wrote after one morning of yoga that I played live music for a yoga session in Santa Monica on Mother's Day. There are times that can happen, but more often than not, the first stage is just brainstorming. The second phase of songwriting for me is refinement and going back and tweaking the words, maybe adding in a variation of the original melody. But where the magic and the healing really happens is getting out what you need to say or sing. A lot of times when I am singing, when I'm singing these words, it is more like I'm saying these words. Like, for example, this morning I was just recounting what happened that was really bothering me. I was keeping the story in rhythm and I was keeping it in sort of a melodic pattern, but I would not necessarily call that a song. There's many different definitions of song, so you could call that a song, but for me, that's more of like the brainstorming phases of how I write my music. The key to doing this brain dump is really just having no judgment. And this is sort of the hardest part, but also the most freeing part, because step 2, the refinement, the wordsmithing, all of that, that's where the craftsmanship comes in. Brainstorming is purely just connecting with yourself and your spirit and letting out whatever needs to come up. So to recap, if you want to use songwriting to help process your emotions, there are several steps. Step 1 is to find an instrument. And if you don't play an instrument, you can find beats online. There's libraries upon libraries of beats and rhythms so that you can still practice singing along to a beat or a rhythm, and you don't have to have an instrument. You can also, if you're digitally savvy, you can use MIDI, you can create your own beat, that sort of thing, but find a backing track, essentially. It could be just a rhythm, or it could be a soundtrack of some kind, and then you want to sing along. You want to start vocal toning, is what we call it. So you're humming, you're singing, you're making sounds, and eventually you start letting out words, and the words start to tell a story. You can go all the way into just talking about your day, but letting it free flow, like without any judgment, is what's most important here. And if you start to find words that feel good to sing about or to say, like, I'm letting it go, or I lost it yesterday, or whatever it is that comes up, lean into that. So you're in this repetition, and which allows you to sort of stay grounded and express yourself through the rhythm and through the sound. Sometimes this can bring up emotion, and it's okay if you want to scream or you want to cry. But I always have my voice memo recorder on. I can go back and reflect on my songwriting. That's when I take everything into phase 3. Phase 1 would be instrument catching a vibe. Phase 2 is sounding, expression, letting out words, seeing if you can find a theme, something that you want to dive deeper into. Phase 3 would be actually sitting down with those words that you just created with no judgment and looking at them in a very loving way. In this phase 3, when we're going through the words and we're fitting them into the different melodies that we just sort of sang through, we might not know all of the different melodies and parts of the song, but I usually just try to start with the verse or the chorus, just one section. Allow things to fall into place. And maybe I'll listen back to my voice memo. The sounding that I'm hearing starts, it's like I'm listening to myself to crack a code or something, because I can start listening back to the words, and then I'm thinking of other words that fit within the rhyme and the rhythm, not always rhyming, but to just fit in the structure that I've sort of created with the song. This is the phase that can literally take forever in songwriting, because it's like fine combing through all of this creative stuff that you just let out, all of the emotion. And oftentimes, if there is some emotion there, you probably aren't going to just process it by writing one song. What I've found through this process is that I tended, well, now I'm very aware of it, but I don't do it so much anymore, at least not right now. But when you have a predominant emotion that's sort of living inside of you, this is the emotion that will tend to come up in your songwriting over and over again. For the longest time, I was writing like very sad, soft songs, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it wasn't until I was experimenting and I had people to play with, or I started writing punk songs, that I was able to like let out this other side of me, which is actually fueled by a lot of powerful emotion and anger. My music really shifted from that point in time. I'm in this place where I have a much broader understanding of music theory, and so I can create different movements just through the chords and the sound itself, but I'm still seeking out what is the main theme that I'm looking at here, because it does come from an emotional place. And what's the story that I'm trying to tell? After you have your spontaneous expression, the editing and the reflection is also a very important part of how to process your emotions, because ultimately where you end with that song is not necessarily going to be the end of that emotional phase, but it can be very cathartic to finish that song, because it can coincide with the ending of a chapter, because you're actually able to look at what you're writing and have more of an understanding of yourself. I've done this before. For example, when I was writing so many songs, I felt really disconnected from those songs for a year or almost 2 years, because I just felt like I worked that chapter of my life so much through that lens that it doesn't even belong to me anymore. But of course, when I play the songs, I still love them. As a songwriter or an artist, you're always going to have an evolving relationship with your work. I think this is so important to have that non-attachment mindset, because it changes all the time, and your perspective of something changes all the time based on what mood you have. And if you have a lot of big emotions like me, then it's super important to have an outlet like this where you can actually let everything out, and then even review and reflect on them, to let them go, or to share them through a lens that you're proud of, instead of just sitting with it and letting it eat you up inside. How do we get to growth and expansion through songwriting? Definitely through the editing and refinement phase. That's one way that we can experience growth, because we are reflecting on what we just released through our spontaneous expression. However, I find that this really comes over a long period of time. For example, like when I was saying in 2023, when I was writing a lot of songs about this particular relationship ending. The more that you work on your craft, the more that you work on your songs and do have that sort of self-reflection, the more that you'll be able to understand yourself. You can even use songwriting as a tool to manifest your dreams and desires. So let me explain. When I was writing my record in 2023, as I mentioned, most of the songs were breakup songs and really sad. I wanted to imagine a relationship that was the opposite of what I was experiencing. I wrote this fun, upbeat song about falling in love, even though I wasn't actually falling in love, like my heart was breaking. I went through the process of reconnecting with those feelings of falling in love. And what was it that made me feel like I was falling in love? And what did I want from a safe and supportive relationship? What did I want to feel from that relationship? Then I was imagining this new space. Just by getting my head into that new space instead of this old broken heart space, I was creating new neural pathways of what I want my life to be like. So now in real life, I've already imagined what that will be like, and I can recognize what that will look like and feel like. I can make more space for that to actually arrive into my life. Songwriting can be a really powerful tool, and just writing in general is really powerful. So if you aren't musically inclined yet and you want to learn, you can hang around here. I'll be teaching more classes soon. But also, there's no shame in just practicing this same concept through journaling. It's almost the same thing. I've been journaling just as much as I've been songwriting since I was a kid. The main difference between journaling and songwriting is that in journaling, you pretty much just usually write and then you forget about it. Very rarely do you actually go back and you read what you wrote. In songwriting, there is that last step of refinement and polishing the story that we want to tell. I do feel like there is more of this closure that can happen, whereas with journaling, it's just letting it out there, letting it go, or like writing down what it is that you want, which is all very good as well. I just love songwriting because not only do you get the benefits of journaling and ultimately creating a product, a song that you can perform, which also can be a very healing act, is getting in front of people and sharing your song. But on top of all that, just being with music and having the voice and the breath and the body, mind, spirit connection is next level. So how do songs move emotion? Writing and singing both allow for a safe space for expression. Oftentimes when I am home alone, that is my favorite time to write because I know I won't be interrupted. I just feel extra safe. If you don't have any time alone, but you want to start practicing songwriting, maybe there's a space that you can go, like in your car, or go drive to the beach or be out in nature. All of those places are really great for being with yourself and making noise. So how do songs move emotions? First of all, when you're writing the song, you're physically putting it out there, especially if you're going to be writing in the way that I shared that I do with a voice memo recorder. You're just letting it come up and you're putting it out there, whether it's through sound or words or both. You're moving the emotion, literally. Then there's the reflection and refinement stage, which is how we use songwriting as a mirror. So if it's really hard for you to voice what it is that you're feeling, this might be a really great exercise for you to try, because oftentimes if we don't know where we are and what we're feeling, we're not going to be able to communicate with all of the other people that we have in our life. Without communicating where we are, then we won't be able to solve any problems, because you have to know where you are before you can move anywhere in the world. This is metaphorically speaking, but you have to know where you are before you go anywhere. Otherwise, you'll just be lost. Lastly, songs move emotion when you integrate them with other practices. Like I just was speaking about, if you do journal, or after you go through the process of expressing yourself freely and you record it, then the next step would be to write down the words, right? So you can workshop them. By workshopping the words, this is actually allowing you to go deeper into those emotions that might be sitting below the surface. It allows you to go deeper into the story that came up and explore that. If you're just starting out and using this type of technique for songwriting, I would just advise you to stick with it, because once you start to open up the floodgates about a certain emotion that you have, like I mentioned before, typically that is kind of like the underlying emotion for a lot of different areas of your life. You will probably write a lot of songs about that feeling or that emotion, and that's okay, but I want you to stick with it because you can move past that emotion. You can intentionally write about a different emotion like I did, about writing a love song as opposed to a breakup song. Ultimately, there may be a lot to unpack, is what I'm trying to get to. So when my dad passed, for example, I realized how much that was connected to my string of relationships and how there were so many parts that overlapped. I actually, as I was writing this breakup album, felt like I was writing a second album that was just all about him and our relationship. It's like once you start doing this, you're sort of like opening the floodgates of all the different stories and emotions of your past. And that, I think, is partially learning more about yourself so that you can decide to put those things to rest. You can take with you what you want to into your future or into the final songs. There's so much insight that you can gain from going through this process, integrating with other healing practices, even if it is just a daily singing and starting to let words out for 5 minutes or something. The first few times that you do this exercise, you might not have any words that come out because it might be just very awkward. But the more that you practice, the more will come up. So I would love to hear if you have done this before. If you're a musician and songwriter, do you use your emotions to navigate your song topics? Let me know if your process is similar to mine in any way. I've got 7 journal prompts here. All of these journal prompts are so good. So maybe I will actually share all of these as a download. But just to stay current with what we talked about today, your first journal prompt would be to think of an emotion that you've been feeling and just start writing about it. Why are you feeling this way? Like, what's triggering you? What have you noticed it for a while? When was the first time that it started? Try to really get to the root of where this is coming from. And maybe you'll start to see that actually this started, you thought that it was maybe a current thing this year, but you remember that time when you were 15 and you had a similar feeling or something like that. Just try to write as much as you possibly can about it. What's the story underneath it? How does it make you feel? How do you feel it in your body? Is it sadness? Is it anger? Is it happiness? Are you writing something that's really joyful and you've just been feeling so good, so you want to share that? Just write as much as you can about it. So I would try to write 3 pages. Write 3 pages of whatever this is, whatever this emotion is, everything that comes to mind as you're writing through it, just free flow writing. And then take a pen or a highlighter or something if you have one and go back and highlight some of your favorite phrases that you wrote about. From there, I would take those phrases and I would put them into a Google Doc. That's when you can start editing. You can find a melody and you can put those words to a melody, or you could probably even use AI at this point to take your lyrics and build it into a song. But let me know how that goes for you. I'm so curious to know if you listen to this episode and you finish your journal prompts, send them to me if you'd like. I would love to give you some tips on how to put them to music if you haven't figured it out already. In the meantime, if you want more journal prompts for songwriting, I have 7 of them here in front of me. So I will share that on my website as a free download, and I'd love to hear what comes of it. After you go through them, do you have any more insight? Maybe it's just so simple that you let out these emotions, you gave them a place to live, that you feel free of them. There's so much to work with here. part of learning and evolving in this lifetime is really just becoming aware of what's inside of us. And our words are so powerful and our emotions are so powerful. But oftentimes we don't have the words and we don't know what the emotion is because we're just numbing ourselves to get through the day. And I know that I can be very focused on work and I definitely push my emotions down, but I have a lot of big emotions. So if I just let them go all the time, then I wouldn't get anything done because I would just be in my emotions all the time, in my feels. So there's a balance, right, of being able to create and being able to work and having that feminine flow and that masculine structure and bringing it all together into a beautiful piece of art. So I hope you enjoyed this episode today. If you have any questions, if you want me to go deeper into my process or even share some of my personal experiences writing these songs, writing any of my songs, please feel free to message me. You can reach me on social media or at Courtney@musicismymantra.com. Next week, we have our very first guest on, Julie Mutnansky from the Grammy Foundation. I can't wait for you guys to meet her and to hear our conversation. Stay tuned for that. Until then, stay healthy, wealthy, and wise. Thank you. Bye.